specific topics with industry experts and discuss those specific subjects for the benefit of our viewers. Apart from this, we also have Realty Plus Real Talk video interview series where I speak to industry experts one on one to know their honest views and opinions and real facts and figures. As I said, our magazine is available in digital edition. We also have a e-newsletter which goes out to the entire database every morning with the latest news of the sector and also the opinions and views of the industry experts. Realty Plus is also strong on the social media platforms from Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, and that is the medium through which we stay connected with our peers, our stakeholders, our sponsors, and we promote our products on these platforms. This was just a small snippet of the product portfolio of Realty Plus. In case you would like to know more about these products, do get in touch with our publisher and business head, Tripti Kedia. The information is right there. So thank you all for being here with us today. And I thank our eminent speakers also for taking out their time and being here with us to share their valuable views. I also thank our partners and sponsors for helping us put this event together. So Khyati, back to you to conduct the conclave for the day.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sapna, for letting us know what all Realty Plus is doing in this new digital era, along with it being a publishing magazine. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I would like to welcome all of you to the 12th edition of Realty Plus Conclave and Excellence Awards 2020, the virtual edition powered by our partner, Great White Electricals. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we move forward for our inaugural address, I'd like to welcome Dr. Anurag Batra, known as Mughal of Media. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Anurag Batra is the chairman and editor-in-chief of BW Business World and Exchange for Media Group. I'd like him to please come onto the screen and welcome and address the audience. Very warm welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, Khyati. It's my honor and privilege to be on a Realty Plus platform. Realty Plus, thanks to Tripti and Sapna's collaborative leadership, and Tripti being overall in charge, has in the last 16 plus years been the only national and consistent voice of real estate. It's a B2C real estate magazine. That's how it started, but today is digital. It is 360-degree, and Sapna just took you through the 360-degree gamut of what Realty Plus does. I only want to say that we're the true B2C real estate magazine, but we also become a voice of the real estate industry, and we try to be a positive catalyst for the industry. We're talking on October 9th. The last 2 months have been a little better for the business and economy in general, and even for the real estate sector. We can see the green shoots of business coming back. The next 45 days, 35 days are Diwali, this pre-festive season, and in Navratras you will see bookings. So I think the best time for real estate in a while is the next 2-3 months. And let me again tell you my own views about what I think will happen. First of all, for the first time, the young house buyer will be on the prowl soon, is on the prowl right now. Millennials who have never valued owning a home will for the first time own a home. They will buy a home, and you'll see 40-50% of buyers being millennials. Second is the middle belly of real estate. Affordable housing and plus will see traction. Third is the warehousing space has been a champion. With the rise in e-commerce, warehousing is growing. Interest in warehousing investments is growing. Commercial right now may not look very attractive, but the need for an office space will always be there. And with social distancing norms, even if you have 50% of your workforce working from home, it will be compensated by the distance you need to give. And again, you need to rebuild offices. You need to build offices like a lounge, a place where people go to de-stress, not necessarily offices. The work from anywhere culture would change the nature of office and work. Last but not the least, retail. I know last 6-7 months, retail has been impacted in a big way, but it has started to come back. An omni-channel, so you have a physical presence, but online presence may start the sale, but it may get consummated in terms of retail. Also, better tenant and landlord relationships have been forged during pandemic. So I can only believe that the real estate sector needs to be looked at city-wise. Different cities are behaving differently. Certain cities like Bangalore are seeing activity which is even better than pre-lockdown. So clearly the real estate sector is not all gloom and doom. I think there is a bright spot which will only get bigger. The only thing it has done, it has made us more professional. The developers have to focus on what projects they can immediately sell. The pricing has to be realistic. So I think the next 6 to 12 months will be a hugely better time for real estate than it has been. I want to wish all the speakers, all the stakeholders, the real estate ecosystem well. And we at Reality Plus will continue to serve you, and we're grateful for your patronage. Thank you so much. Back to you, Khyati.
Thank you so much, Dr. Batra, for giving an enthusiastic start to the event. On that wonderful note, let's begin the e-conclave with our first session of the day. But before that, I would once again like to urge all of you to join our online conversation using our hashtag RPWestVirtual. Ladies and gentlemen, today all our speakers, all the eminent stalwarts of the industry are the ones who are the real nation builders, the ones giving shelter to our roof to our heads, and also giving these amazing spaces that we love to visit, whether it's been from the Renaissance era or even in the present era. These are the monuments, the buildings that we look forward to travel and look at and marvel at this amazing visual art. Ladies and gentlemen, this buildings speaks for themselves. And this first edition, in fact, the first session of the day we have with us, which will be moderated by Mr. Anush Puri, Chairman, Anurag Group. Mr. Anush Puri has over 30 years of experience in Indian and global real estate markets. He set up Anurag in 2017, and under his leadership, Anurag is now the largest independent residential agency in India with significant presence in GCC countries. I would now like to introduce you to our eminent speakers in an alphabetical order. I welcome Mr. Amit Goenka, Managing Director and CEO, Nisus Finance and Investment Managers and Nisus FinCorp Private Limited. Amit Goenka brings nearly 16 years of top-tier multinational experience in investment banking, direct investments, and strategy. He specializes in structured finance, valuations, and mergers and acquisitions within real estate. I'd also like to welcome Anuranjan Mohnoth, Founder, Managing Director, and CEO, Limos Alternate Investment Advisors Private Limited. Anuranjan Mohnoth has wide experience in various cross-functional areas at some of the leading business conglomerates, including Future Group's $450 million Horizon Fund, SL Group, Reliance, Little & Company, and setting up of real estate fund for the Lalbhai Group Arvind Limited. We also have with us Mr. Dev Santani, Managing Director, Brookfield Special Investments, Brookfield Asset Management. Mr. Dev Santani has more than 17 years of work experience in the industry, including private equity, structured finance. He joined Brookfield in 2014 and since then is responsible for several of the firm's investments and managing the joint venture partner relationships in the region. Our next speaker for this session, Mr. Irfan A. Qazi, Chief Investment Officer, Swami Investment Fund, SBI Cap Ventures Limited. Irfan is a finance professional with 25 plus years of experience in international work experience in alternate investments. He has led investments in telecom, roads and renewables, industrial, hospitality, residential, commercial, and stressed assets. Our next speaker for the session, Mr. Kaushik Desai, Executive Director, Walton Street, India. Mr. Kaushik Desai, a chartered accountant and a company secretary, has more than 22 years of work experience with expertise in transaction structuring, investments in corporate debt, managing key relationships with investors, funds and intermediaries, and evaluating new investment opportunities. Our next speaker for the session, Mr. Sharad Mittal, Executive Director and CEO, Motilal Oswal Real Estate. With over 17 years of experience, Sharad Mittal has been instrumental in building Motilal Oswal's investment focus around a sustainable long-term strategy. He is a member of CII National Committee on Real Estate and Housing and IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry Committee on Urban Development, Smart Cities, Real Estate and Infrastructure. And last but not the least, our speaker for the session, Mr. Sunil Rohkale, Managing Director and CEO, ASK Group. Sunil Rohkale has been with ASK Group since 2008 and has been on the board since 2012. He has over 22 years of experience in the banking and finance industry and has previously worked with ICICI Bank. I'd welcome all of you gentlemen on the screen. A very warm welcome to all of you. And I'd like to request our moderator to please take over the proceedings.
Thank you very much, Kathy. It's a delight to be here. Thanks to Anurag, my friend, Sapna and Tripti. They do a fantastic job. Always a pleasure to be on Reality Plus's show. It's also a pleasure to have this as the inaugural session. Delighted inaugural with last mile funding. I thought Anurag spoke very well. He said the sales part, perhaps the next 35 days will determine, where India is really on the residential sales leading up to Diwali. And then we've got 7 stalwarts. I'm absolutely looking forward to this. I was looking carefully that, how much time do I have? And then I realized it's 1 hour, 15 minutes, so I can pace it up nicely. It's nice to have, several of my friends on the screen, with whom I deal very regularly. So I'm going to ask all the tough questions that people ask me to these 7 individuals, and I draw knowledge from them and then bundle it into a different perspective and send it out. But really, I love the topic as well, Kathy. What Anurag, Sapna, and Tripti put together. Will last mile funding, which was triggered by the government and now supported by the private equity guys, would it revive the Indian real estate sector? I think it's interesting. And one thing that comes up, Irfan, I'm going to go straight to you. When it last mile funding comes up, the only name that comes up straight is Swami Fund. Last mile funding means equal to Swami Fund. And I was reading this morning, and it said I think this was some news that came in that over 30 housing projects worth 4,200 crores had received final approval from yourself, from Swami Fund. I don't know whether those are right numbers or not, but that's what it said. I have 3 very simple questions, Irfan. One is, what has your experience been? You come from a very different, not very different field, but none of us knew what this fund was about. Would love to know whether what you had expected this to be exactly what it is, or it is very different. The second, is 25,000 crores going to be sufficient? And third, how difficult it is to get an NOC from the NBFCs who have to cede the first charge to you and not get sort of paid for the debt to begin with. Ultimately, whatever is left, they will get paid. So 3 simple things. What has your experience been? Did you expect this to be exactly what it is? Do you think 25,000 crores may be insufficient? And the third one is how difficult it is to get the NOCs. Sorry, Irfan, you're on mute.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for this, giving me a chance to appear on this webinar. Anush, to answer your questions, first one, my experience with this fund, unparalleled, unprecedented, you can use the word to describe the Swami Fund. And like you said, Swami Fund has got more brand recognition than most brands in real estate within a very, very, very short period of time, right? I personally don't know of any other real estate fund that has a social impact objective. So in that way, we are very different. It is a fund with a social impact objective, with a clearly defined mandate to complete construction. And that kind of mandate, like I said, is one. not seen or heard before. And two, it is of a scale that is also that, not seen in a domestic real estate fund, at least in the past, right? So we knew this was different, and we knew we had to get different results this time from funding real estate. And the obvious thing is that if you want to do something different, you have to do things maybe differently than what they have been done in the past before, right? You cannot expect to get different results by doing the same things all over again. So our experience, and we've been learning, it's a continuous learning program for us as well, and that's reflected in the way we have molded our requirements to not just demands but the requirements of the industry. So first things first, what we did very differently from the way funding has been looked at in the past is we have looked at this as last mile funding. And when we spoke of last mile funding, and when we speak of last mile funding, we talk of that as funding that by itself is sufficient to complete the project. So funding that is not reliant, that is not dependent on the ecosystem, on the environment, on sales going ahead. There is maybe some reliance on receivables, and that the extent of that that depends on what our diligence tells us about the quality of those receivables. But that's about it. The funding here is only is by itself sufficient to complete, and this is different from what every banker and lender has and every developer for that matter has sought funding for. So for example, there I personally believe there is a magic number 25 crores, right? Every developer tells me that 25 crore it will set everything, right? It doesn't. It has been tried before, it has been tested before, and there is enough evidence of the results floating around, right? So we had to do something different. So that's one. Two, what we did different was, for the first time, a private equity fund is looking at a project, not a promoter. And when he sees a project, he sees trapped home buyers in distress, and steps in to rescue that. He does not pass value statements on the ethics of the promoter, on the track record of the promoter, on the demand supply situation in the vicinity, right? He decides that there is a home buyer that needs to be rescued, and they step in when everybody is running out, like that fireman example. So we come in when no one else is willing to provide funding. I don't mean to be dramatic, but that's the way the approach to the funding is. We have no geographical preference, right? We are not a fund that says we have a sweet spot of 75 crores and we generally do our investments in MMR and Bangalore. We do our investments anywhere in India where RERA is applicable. And these are not high and mighty statements. We are currently spread out, I think, over 30 locations in the country. So that's a significant spread in a very short period of time. We also don't have a sweet spot, like I said. So we look at deals between up to 800 crores. The maximum exposure we take in a single investment is 400. So we have the right to do multiple deals with the same developer till we reach a cap of 800 crores. Our funding is also very different from the way funding has generally been looked at. So our funding places an emphasis on construction, on completion of construction. It does not even talk about repayment till the construction is complete. It is completely back-ended. It emphasizes that even inflows will be used not to service the lender or the investor, but will be used to accelerate the project. It talks about funding that will be simultaneously available on various fronts, so that while you are waiting for cement to dry in one location, in another part in the same project, you can continue with. You can start finishing while you're still going up vertically. So it's going to dramatically reduce the construction timeline. Finally, I think a big difference that we have inculcated here, and which will be observed more and more going ahead, is we are not talking about funding developers, we are talking about funding projects. And that is reflected in the manner in which disbursements happen. So I have worked in several private equity funds in the past, and we've not done weekly funding for every project that we get into. Funding is against visible progress. Funding is against measurable progress, and funding is done frequently. There is no lump sum funding, there is no war chest that is given to them, there is no petty cash amount that is with them. So my team acts as a project CFO. The developer will lead the project, but my team acts as a project CFO, authorizing, approving, vetting every payment that is done, and we use the project of a project services of a project management company that's actually stationed at the project, right? So we have daily reports on material coming in, on labor mobilization, on physical progress, and especially on safety. So we are trying to place an emphasis and a premium on safety also at our work sites. So that's how we are doing things slightly differently, and we are hopeful that the results will therefore be different.
No, this is fantastic. No, this is really very comprehensive. And, I loved it when you said the sweet spot is 25 crores. It is true. Most of the guys come in and say, I just need 25 crores. And it is absolutely true what you said is, but equally, I think 3-4 very interesting things is, and sometimes you wonder is that, why is Swami Fund given money to a certain developer? As you said is that, we're not looking at the track record of the developer. We're actually looking at the track record of the project. And we're looking at the demand supply. We are a social impact fund. And, location is not really a preference. It is wherever the project is, as you rightly said, is out of whatever projects that you funded. They are in very different locations, 30 different locations. It is absolutely interesting, and Irfan, to some extent, it has opened up the doors for other funds to come in. But perhaps they're at a little disadvantage because you have you have been given preferred status by the government on a couple of things. I don't know whether the private guys who are wanting to set this up would be able to get the same advantage as you've got. So, first things first, we are doing things differently, like I said, and therefore, if social impact is the objective, and there are public funds involved, the government is stepping in to ensure that the objective is met and public funds are secured, right? That is the role that the statutory protection that we have is playing here. So it is not like private sector. There is a private sector fund that is being given incremental government protection to generate private returns. So we are not. So that's one. So that's my immediate reaction to that. Yeah. So just tell me, Irfan, how easy or difficult it is to get the NOCs from the NBFCs?
So I'll say we have a track record already to show that while it's difficult, it is still possible. So I think one of your earlier questions also was, where are we in terms of, achievements so far, or how many projects have we funded? We are glad to report, and we do it very publicly. We are amongst the most public private equity funds ever, and that always gets a smile to my face, at least when I think about it, because otherwise the investment objective, the mandate, the strategy, the restrictions were known to the investment manager and their investors, and that's about it, right? This is, developers can correct me if I misstate something here. Everybody knows about our fund. We have completed about 26 IC meetings so far, which is a huge thing in 9 months. We have provided funding to about 33 projects that will complete construction of about 25,000 homes. So we began final approvals to about 33 projects. About 1 in 3 projects are where sites have actually are now fully functional as a result of our funding. About 95 projects have received preliminary clearance, and if we manage to fund all the projects that we hope to fund, about 84,000 homes will get completed. That in itself tells you that we have got the NOCs required, right? It is, but it's been a very difficult road. There is no doubt about it. So while we come in to rescue the home buyer, and while we hope that a change in the project fortunes will also ultimately benefit the lender, the initial reaction hasn't been that they would work with us all the way. So while there are a set of investors, while there are a set of lenders who have worked closely with us, there is a large subset of projects that do not have any lenders to start with. So we can get significant progress on those projects straight away, and then even projects where there are lenders. We have, like I said, been through a continuous learning process in the last 9 months or so. We have heard and reacted to feedback faster than, at least we had some notions about how fast bureaucracy works, and at least the bureaucrats I work with work a lot faster than I do. I'm, trying to keep pace with them most of the time. Even you have interacted with some of them, so you know who the people I'm talking about, right? So we have actually even molded the mandate, carved out special features in the mandate to be more accommodative to lenders, and as a result, we are seeing more and more lenders come on board. So we are now sharing a portion of the cash flows with the existing lenders. We are sharing a portion of the security with the existing lenders, and that gives the lenders some amount of cash flow on their investment, some first charge on their investment, so they are more willing to seed charge. That is also an approach that we also had to educate a lot of home buyers in the process, right? That we need to ensure that the project survives. We are on your side. Help us complete your homes. Taking action against one party might end up hurting yourself in the process. So give us time. We have the funds. We will supervise the completion of the project. We will ensure, or at least try to ensure, that mistakes of the past aren't repeated, and therefore complete the project. And therefore, we've had to convince all the stakeholders, lenders as well as home buyers, to actually do what we've done so far.
Yeah, but good point. I forgot about that. Is it fun? Is the home buyers as well, because you have to take their blessings equally going forward. Dave, I'm going to come to you. In Brookfield, big news all the time. I know it's a different part of Brookfield, but I hope that the big news of Bangalore gets done. In the next few days. But great job you guys are doing. Quick 2 or 3 questions, Dave. We heard Irfan speak. Is there a plan to set up a potential last mile funding vehicle? One. Second is, I'm sure there are a lot of NBFCs coming to you and saying, look, Dave, here's our portfolio. Would you want to really take this off us? That's the second one. And the third is, are the number of deals that are coming to you on the credit side increasing, given that many of the NBFCs are slowing down?
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Anuj. So the answer is we've been active on residential, as you know, for a while now. We haven't necessarily built up a massive book, but that's probably, in hindsight, not a bad thing. And we were always a little bit held back on the sector because we did feel that the risk pricing was a little bit off. And that's the reason we didn't really go and scale up the way we would have otherwise liked to. I think today, absolutely, because of the NBFCs going out, from an opportunity perspective, it's huge. So the deal flow is huge. And, back of envelope, NBFC sector has done about 300 billion, if I'm not wrong, close to 300 billion on RE financing. So even if that book shrinks by 5 to 10%, these are just massive numbers from an opportunity size perspective. And we are seeing a lot of deal flow. Yields have moved higher, as they should have, Anuj, to some extent in the first place. So I think we all recognize this. The problem is all of this so-called debt was actually, a large part of it was equity. So if you borrow money at 18% and with an NCD to buy a piece of land at 80% LTV, that's actually equity. And just because you did it as a debenture, it shouldn't change the fact that the risk is equity and the return should have been appropriate to what an equity guy would earn. So yields have moved higher because a lot of the new players and foreign funds will price their capital according to the risk. I think the issue we are facing is the sector is obviously in a lot of stress from a economics perspective, and fundamentally the business has to make that kind of IRR to pay you an IRR, right? And for people have to generate like a 20% IRR to promise you something, and we don't really see that playing out very well. And a lot of last mile financing opportunities, I think we are seeing a couple of issues. One, that a lot of these projects are stranded, and then when we try and invest in them, you'd be surprised, but we don't see sales pick up necessarily immediately after, because once you lose customer confidence, and then you start building really fast, you don't really see customers rushing back because there are all these rumors floating around in the market, and it takes time for all of that perception to come through. Plus, customers have formed an expectation, especially post-COVID, that there should be bigger discounts. So between all of that, it's this whole last mile financing when you're trying to make higher yields, and of course Irfan's model is completely different. But if you're trying to make significantly higher returns, is challenging. The other issue we are facing with a lot of opportunities we are seeing is that there is no equity left in a lot of ongoing portfolios.
Good
And
point.
guys have pretty much wiped out all the equity, irrespective of whether they are willing to take a write down or not. There's just not enough meat for somebody to come in, pump in money, and then you've got to make sure the promoter is incentivized and has some capital behind you. And for that, the kind of write down the existing institution would have to take, the economics usually don't fall into play. So I think the summary is the opportunity is huge. We'd like to really scale up Resi. The alternate capital sources have pretty much disappeared, so you can get better pricing. But the economics of the business for you to be able to make those returns are still kind of falling into place. On the portfolio side, we've been in a touch with a bunch of NBFCs and all the usual suspects about buyouts of portfolios. I think again it's a very attractive opportunity. It's happened everywhere else in the world on the back of crisis that you get portfolios cheap at 60, 70 cents to the dollar, and you can potentially make really good returns if you manage to asset manage them well and get an exit. So we have looked at a lot of them. We continue to look at a lot of them. I think the only couple of challenges we are facing is one, the structures or the deals are not necessarily structured the way we would want them, whether it's escrows or asset management or documentation rights, etc. And then if you try and correct each loan, you end up literally doing like 30 mini deals, which kind of defeats the purpose of buying the portfolio. And then a lot of these portfolios have too many small exposures within them, and so diligencing them and asset managing them at a portfolio level, just you need to create a little bit of a mini army, which a lot of funds are not set up with that kind of HR planning. I'll stop there. That's just our sense on the portfolio buyout.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and both the points are good. But you're starting to see increased number of deals. But you're saying is that the economics of business needs to work.
Yeah.
Whilst they're willing to give a high yield, and for a foreign fund, you'll need that kind of yield. But you're saying is that economics of business, and second is that on the NBFCs, the structure of the deal. Given that in many times these are smaller deals, both have fantastic points. At this stage, I'm going to get Sharad and Sunil. I have a huge respect for these two individuals on several accounts. One, they're very radical thinking. Both of them are very different thinking guys. They have their own thought. They've been hugely successful. They've been sort of entrepreneurs in their own right. And unlike Irfan, you are married to the project. These both are married to the relationship. I've seen them closely. They just invest in relationship in there. First to you, Sharad. Let me ask you. What is this recovery going to be? V shape, U shape, W shape, K shape, L shape. What is it that you are seeing? Nothing to do with last mile funding, but I would love to know your and Sunil's thought. What are you seeing on the recovery?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hi, Anuj. So, like you pointed out, similarities between my way of working and Sunil. So let me just tell everyone that I have worked with Sunil for 10 years at ICICI and ASK. Probably all that is rubbed off, and I'm carrying on to that. As far as the markets are concerned, recovery and suddenly the news flow in last 15 days is how the sales have picked up and how everything is turned around. I would look at all of it with a bit of skeptic. I think my personal view on residential here is that I look at it into three segments. One is the luxury high end. If you keep Bombay out, anything which is an upward of 7,000 rupees a square feet. Mid-income housing, which is say between 4 to 7, and then the low cost. I think low cost has tremendous amount of demand, but the business drivers there, given the margins, the client profile, and that segment will be maximum impacted by the entire disruption of COVID. I think there will be a challenging time for at least next 12 to 18 months. Luxury, it's well known, there has been overbuilt and the demand and supply ratio is very skewed there, and I think it will continue to struggle, specifically Delhi and Bombay. We have seen some green shoots of luxury getting sold in Bombay, but I think all of it is where people have been at home and suddenly they believe that they can get good deals. And I get so many friends and family people calling me saying that, is this the time? Are we going to miss out? So there is a sense of deal making that I see, but I don't think so it's sustainable. So I think luxury will continue to struggle. I think the sweet spot is this middle income housing, the India story across the board. And I happen to interact a lot with our equity research guy. You pick up any segment, it is driven by the middle class of India. It's the Marutis that will run the country, not the Mercedes. So I think this segment of 5,500, 6,000 rupees, and that's where I think it will come back faster. And some of these IT cities outside Delhi and Bombay, I also believe 4 factors will come in together some point in next 2 years. I don't know, maybe you probably will have more data and insight on that. But four things like, which I think when these things comes together sometime in next 24, 36 months, we would see a sustainable recovery. One, I think demand supply. I think Delhi NCR less said better it is. Delhi Bombay has also been struggling. But if you look at Bangalore and Hyderabad, parts of Pune, Chennai has own struggle, but some part of Chennai as well. And these markets, probably the demand supply will find a better equilibrium over a period of next 24 months, also at the back of low supply from the RERA days. So once the RERA came in, subsequently the supply has been gone down. Second, 10-year price stagnation. Peak property prices were seen in 2013-14. They've been stagnated for 7 years. Couple of more years, a 10-year price stagnation. I think interest rate, a lot of us probably don't give as much importance, at least when I interact with a lot of people don't, but being from a mortgage background, I can tell you that interest rate of 115 to 100 basis point makes a huge difference to the affordability, definitely to the middle income. And I think fourth, and I hope we settle well in the office space, because we don't want one more disruption of work from home gaining momentum. But one thing is there, the kind of interactions that I've had with friends and extended family, and I think this work from home, people have been spending a lot of time with their family. So the discussions around some of the big decisions in life, buying a home, kids' education, there is that much more time. So I think if the work from home continues, the need of a house, both the physical need of having a larger house and the emotional need of spending that much time with the family, these 4-5 factors some point of time will come together. And I'm hoping this time around it will be more velocity-led growth. But I think the debt unwinding of NBFC is hawkish. I think that's not going away for the amount that Dave has mentioned. It's a scary number, 300 billion. That's a very large number.
I know. And he said even if it's like a 5-10%, I mean, what Dave was saying is it's a very, very large number that you're talking about.
People used to only talk about consolidations of developer as if developers are the only people in the value chain who will get consolidated. It's the entire value chain. Everybody will get consolidated. And it's going to be a little painful journey from that perspective. But I think the mid-income housing, the entire the middle-class housing, I feel will recover faster.
Yeah. And Sharad, the interesting that you're saying is that in your thought, mid-level is going to recover better than or quicker than the affordable housing. Which is like, I would have thought that affordable will continue to do well. But, great analysis that, perhaps that segment has got really badly impacted.
I think what also, Anuj, happening is the profile of the home buyers. If you look at their ability to borrow money for the home, they borrow at 12-13%. So the segment in which there is the least margin, the ability to pay EMIs is lower. The cost of borrowing for the home buyer and the developer is the highest. And also the margins are thin. My view has changed more so after the COVID. I think that segment is impacted the most, which buys say 10, 15, 5 lakh rupees home.
Sure, you used the word consolidation, and I'm going to sort of come on the consolidation for the developers itself. We've seen consolidation happening over the last 3-4 years of the developers. Hopefully there's going to be a new wave of consolidation, given the situation with COVID. Do you see a new landscape for developers emerging in years to come?
So, Anuj, I think I always give an example of some of the other asset classes in India, and take equity markets or insurance.
Correct.
All asset classes for a period of time, gets a, as I call them, free run and not regulated. So equity markets started in 78, till the time 91 scams happened, and the regulator was set up in 94. And then there is a paradigm shift of consumer protection, and eventually it will lead to scale. It will lead to rules, regulation, and the scale. Real estate, the real bump came in 2002-3 with the IT cities coming. And I would say till 2016, it was a free run. The accountability towards the consumer and the way the business was done. And once the regulator was put into the place, which is 2017, I think there was a structural change brought into the sector. Now that got coupled with the liquidity crisis. Had that happened when the sector was going through a much better phase, it would have taken it up much easier. But it was going through a challenging time, and the regulator was put in a bit of a retrospective effect. With the liquidity crisis, these two things means that there will be consolidation that is going to take place. Now, consolidation sounds very nice, and when you look at other sectors, you feel it will bring more, it will be good. But the process of consolidation is slow. The sector is fragmented. There are just too many stakeholders. Like Irfan was mentioning about home buyers. I was looking at a couple of last mile fundings. I couldn't just put my hand around how do I handle so many home buyers? Who's going to interact? Who's going to do all that stuff? So I think given the number of stakeholders involved, number of developers, I think consolidation is going to be slow, but this is inevitable. I think it has to be.
Sort of 18-24 months, or you think it's even longer than that?
I think wherever there is a juice or there is some left in the, it will happen at the back of some catalyst, and that catalyst right now is the lenders. Developer on their own walking away and doing deal making is unlikely to happen. Like they were saying, equity is kind of evaporated. Their equity in the game is negligible. Actually, they're sitting on negative equity. If they do all the hard work, also they're not going to take home much. So I think it will happen at somebody has to play a catalyst role, which has to be lender. Yeah. And they will push. And I think this is a slightly more longish journey than 18-24 months. But it will happen in phases, whereas they will happen in burst. That now the challenging time is there, and next 6-8 months there will be project consolidation backed by lenders. And then I think it's a process which will take a couple of years more.
And Sharad, lastly, I mean, you did fantastically well here during the lockdown. You raised your next set of fund, fourth fund, very successful in doing it, and deployed as well as you're going on. What did you say to the investors?
So, Anuj, we raised our fourth fund. We now collectively manage around 3,800 crores. Our last fund is 1,200 crores. It's a domestic fund raised from HNI and family offices. It takes 15-18 months to raise the whole lot. So the fund got closed. Thank you.
I mean, to be able to do, and that also from HNI is even more tougher.
Yeah, so I think so we closed in February this year, right in time, just before the COVID hit us. And it took us 15 months to do that, raise that capital of 1,200 crores. Anuj, it's very simple. I think because we are now on fourth fund, almost 70% of our investors are repeat investors. They are coming because they had a favorable experience in the previous fund. And the replica here is that the magic is you keep doing it and keep going back to them. As far as the investments are concerned, during the fundraise period, we continue to deploy money. We don't wait for fund to have final close. So frankly speaking, in last 8 months, in fact, we started reinvesting last month. So we did our investment in last month, which was after a gap of 8 months. So we are a cautious lot. We are very cautious lot. We do things at our pace, like you said, with selected set of developers with whom we also have a past experience. And but yeah, fundraising was satisfying given that the environment. But I'd like to add one thing here. I get to interact with a lot of HNIs and family office. From outside, it looks like that fundraising, why it could be very challenging to raise a real estate fund. At one end, it is because these people have a lot of their own personal experiences of real estate developer or their own experience with lending money. But the other hand, there is complete lack of opportunities. As the debt returns have collapsed over a period of last 3-4 months, I believe that over a period of next 2 years, we should have more traction. We need to see the news flow need to get a little positive like it has done if the negative news flow continues. But I see next 2 years lot more money. The way you look at the Raheja REIT, Mindspace REIT, money flown in. It's a real estate end of the day. So I think there is money. Domestic investors, there is a lot of depth. They lack patience. Oh, that's the bridge. That's the thing that you have to manage.
Yeah, this must be music to Dave's ears because they are looking to get into the REIT hopefully within this calendar year. So fantastic, Sunil, the magic man. We all have a huge amount of respect for you. 4 or 5 questions. One, how do these NBFCs wind the positions that they have? They were saying that it's very difficult for me to take it up. I mean, he's perhaps one of the biggest boys in the country today. And if he's saying it is difficult for me to do it and they don't have any liquidity to be able to complete it, Irfan can do it, but Irfan is also governed by guidelines. He can't really dole out money to everyone. So honestly, what is going to happen, Sunil, to these NBFCs? Sorry, you are on mute, Sunil. No. Sorry, we can't hear you, Sunil. No. Did you want to log off and log on? Sorry, we're just not being able to hear. Do you want to log off and then log on? Yeah. Anuranjan, I'm going to come to you, my friend, whilst we wait for Sunil. You're the man of small towns. Done exceptionally well. Whenever I met up with you in Ahmedabad, you're a man who is a big professor of small towns. I think Irfan is now there as well, looking to invest in cities that I've not even heard where these cities exist. But Anuranjan, tell us, what's the experience been investing in these small towns on residential real estate?
Oh, I think, small towns, there is a lot of problems in corporate governance. The dealing with the developer is a serious concern. So, other than Ahmedabad, we invested only in cities like Bangalore, Pune, Mumbai, or Chennai. Is this okay?
There's a bit of a disturbance coming in.
Can you hear me now, Anuj? Can you hear me now?
Yes. I was just continuing with Anuranjan and then I'm going to come back to you.
No problem.
Go ahead, Anuranjan.
So, the problem with this small town was more of like corporate governance. And
good point.
There was huge issues related to organization setups, dealing with customers, cash and all. So we really, other than Ahmedabad, we have not invested in any small town. And when we evaluated a city like Surat or Baroda or Rajkot, first we started with investing in Gujarat. So we found that, really in these cities, it will be very difficult to raise investors' confidence that whatever is being received from customer is getting, is coming back to them, So investors are really not comfortable with investing in tier 2 cities unless and until they are 110% sure about credibility of the developer. So if, in fact, what we have seen over a period of time, last 10, 15 years, not much investment has happened in tier 2 cities. Though really they provide a huge opportunity to invest with, particularly when a lot of people are migrating from outside India these days. What we have seen, reverse migration happening in cities of Kerala or Andhra Pradesh or, in Punjab, Haryana, because of COVID situation, which is also giving a huge opportunity to invest in, cities like Coimbatore, Cochin, Chandigarh. But unfortunately, because of the organization setup, corporate governance, and because of lack of transparencies in these, while dealing with customers or while dealing with, any value chain.
Yeah.
So
No.
not really much
but
has
good
happened.
response, Anuranjan. That's the practical
yeah.
position. I think it's just that the corporate governance becomes so difficult in some of these tier 2, tier 3 towns. And, it's not that they recognize, they perhaps are not even recognizing that this is an issue in that is. My second question is, Anuranjan, you started to raise your maiden fund in your independent capacity, 300 crores. How has it been so far?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think the real need today. Thank you. One study of Narrative is that the country will need at least 1 lakh crore rupee dedicated towards these stress assets, and all stress assets will have unique problems. So one particular solution will not fit for all the situations. So in many cases, what we have realized that we'll have to work together with the developers in such a way that we are involved deeply in the projects, so that the project is completed and everybody makes money, including the private equity who is investing, the existing lender, the home buyers get their home, developer makes the residual money. So we developed a hybrid model of a development management plus funding. So wherever we feel that the developer is not up to that quality, where there is a serious concern among customers that whether we need to deal with this brand or not to deal with brands, that means it requires rebranding. It requires a serious upgradation in the confidence level of the customers. It means that the developer need to be replaced in that, and he need to take back seat. So we have evolved a model where a new developer come, he do the project management, the development management, and the funding is done by a fund like us. So here the role of a fund manager increases a bit, and that we have seen in last 15 years when the complete equity model to debt model to structured finance to inventory buying, and I think this is the probably last one which we should have done, where a fund is actively involved in completing the last mile. See, what we have also realized that the co-signatory model has not worked in some of our projects. There are huge ways of diverting money, huge ways. So ideally, that guy has to take backseat. And that is where, we are thinking that, and this particular theory, this particular strategy is getting a good response from the investors. They feel that, yes, there is a time where a lot of stress assets are there. It needs to be restructured. There is a huge scope of recapitalization of a developer's balance sheet. A project needs to be recapitalized. It has to be equity funded. It has to be funded in a way where the project completion is done. And once it is completed, it has to be sold out, and it has to be sold out with the trust. People should come and they should be willing to buy without any hesitation. So that is where the whole value addition is there. So our idea is that, raise a small fund, and focus only on those projects where we are, investing.
It makes sense. And, we've seen that as well. Perhaps the armchair kind of investment hasn't worked. I mean, if you look at the people on the screen, they have been very active participants in managing and maintaining, those debt. I mean, whether it's private equity or debt, on both ways, they have been very involved rather than just saying that we're going to be co-signatories.
Absolutely. So we have seen in like all warehousing funds in India right now, the successful one, they are adopting that kind of model where they are buying land, they are developing by their own, they are executing, and they are developer by own. So what we are doing is that instead of having in-house team, we have tied up with a few developers who will go along with us to close the projects. So it is like a, in-house plus outside model.
Interesting model. Sorry, Sunil, we lost you at that time. So, we were just discussing on this NBFC consolidation. What's your thought? What's the road ahead?
Yeah. Anuj, can you hear me now?
Brilliant.
Yeah. Okay. So, having lent to this sector very early in early 90s till late 2000, right? Build a book of $18 billion for ICICI Bank. I thought enough 1.5 million home loans across 1,200 locations. I thought it is a time to take a change and help the first mile funding or financial closure, first mile. So that's the genesis of the ASK's real estate fund, that you go early stage, because that stage hardly capital is available. Developer balance sheets are very poorly capitalized. There is no capitalized money with him, and he needs the initial leg up. It's very capital intensive. So that was the first mile approach of a very selective, and you rightly mentioned, and which Sharad has rightly built on, that it's a management, it's the promoter matters the most, location second. The margin of safety for both is equally critical, and ultimately alignment of interest to have risk reward in both the favors is the name of the game which we played. But I never thought that in 10 years time I would like to force to go to a last mile funding.
First mile to last mile.
Yeah. So after rising to little less than $1 billion, we felt, today we are talking about last mile, but frankly, as a first mile partner with one of the best developers of this country, in the last 10 years, we did some 13 partnerships with some 30, 35 projects. We thought in 18 itself, we realized that time has come to look at last mile. So we raised the first 10 billion rupees, 1,000 crore fund in March 18 itself.
Before Swami came in.
The Swami name itself is Swami, so we can, so Irfan has a lot of in that sense a different mindset, different mandate, and it is really important from a country's point of view. But when you talk about a private fund, and as a country should look like an exciting opportunity to invest into real estate fund as a financial investment than a physical real estate investment. See, you are dealing with a financial instrument where underlying is real estate.
That's right.
In Indian context, people have been experienced of buying a physical real estate. International investors have seen India changing because of the strong denominator, the demographic, the opportunity, the growth. But what was lacking is the governance, disclosure, transparency, which probably started coming in. So there was different for different investors to look at. And hence in 2018, we raised the domestic fund of the Special Situation Fund, which is actually a last mile fund. Now, here is the connection, Anuj, is that this whole build-up has happened of NBFCs, and they are necessary lender to real estate. Let's be very clear. No, now the different risk practices, different monitoring mechanisms, they may have lent little more than what probably the project deserves, and the money probably was coming easy, so they also given the easy money out, and finally the money has evaporated where? The money is evaporated back to those same NBFCs because they have funded for servicing their own interest. So it is basically you funded the project, you funded the interest, and the project did not progress at all. That has created this current situation of mismatch of cash flows. The project doesn't have enough liquidity, look like, or the project needs the additional capital to keep the crane moving. And that's the problem we are talking about. And that's where the home buyer come into picture. That's where the new capital come into picture. So our belief is that somebody who has been reckless has to take the haircut. Now, there is definitely going to be the haircut. Now, whether it's a developer who is a reckless in borrowing,
So after that, you're right. Somebody has to take that haircut beyond him.
Correct. So I'm saying that developer definitely has to see. There are developers who are willing to come forward and say, look, I have a brand. I'm a reputed person. I have built it for 40 years of time. I don't want to give up like that. I don't want to earn any money. I would probably lose out my own equity, whatever left over. But let me help the lender to structure a plan along with the home buyer to complete the project. And there are at least 10 examples I can tell you that these kind of projects are finding their own self-resolution, where the existing lender is giving additional money and the home buyer is also putting an additional kitty into the project and they are escrowing it. The developer is stepping back. The problem is in the situation where the developer is saying, no, where is my returns? And that's where the projects are getting pushed to IBC.
We should leave it out. My trouble is, Sunil, just on your first instance where you said is that the existing lender is willing to give more money. Yeah. Where they're not willing to give more money, what's going to happen to them then?
Okay, so my view is at this point of time that we probably have the capital in the country which is coming in through the financing route, which is the special situation funds, which are global funds. Now, they may have the expectations of 21 to 23% because they are really coming at a stage where the risks are enhanced. And they are giving capital to kick off the project back into action. They may give part of the money to the existing lender, or existing lender would be fully paid out if he's willing to be reasonable. At the same time, the developer also, because developers in this country are still more optimistic than anybody else on the panel. So the greed, or to that matter, the optimism still is very high, because the price consensus is always going to be a debatable point. And my sense is that in today's reality, the people would go with the margin of safety, downward pricing pressure, and the customer preference of buying a change from an early stage to a late stage or a completion stage only. So these things are going to impact the returns. Now, the developers today, I could see agreeing to the lender, saying that he is organizing a special situation fund. So it is not the developer is taking the initiative, but it is the lender who is taking the initiative to bail him out, as well as the developer out, and ultimately the customers out. So the situation like Indian funds, like our funds, we are going and straight away repaying and refinancing those projects which has got financial viability, which are fitting into every good developer also has got not so good projects. But those projects need to be delivered. Those projects need to be made compliant, because there is a RERA, there is an end customer who is and the end customer is willing to give money provided the cranes are moving. So I think the capital today is going into 100% execution, and partly to the lender. And I agree with you, question you asked with Irfan, that NOC, that it is like calling other person, will you marry me, or will you do courtship with me, correct? And he says, okay, I would do some kind of coffee with you. And that's where intercreditor agreements come into picture, correct? But the real challenge is that we all need to find solution. The idea is not to take the projects to the IBCs, or project to the SURFACE, or the project to the non-compliant. So my sense is that and everybody is not going to find solution, Anuj. And let's be practical about it. When we started the first mile funding, I thought 90% of the developers are not relevant to our kind of strategy. 90% of the country, okay? And I'm talking about top 7 centers, or top 6 centers, or 5 centers. Today, as I progress to last mile, I feel 95% are not even eligible to look at giving any money. That means the consolidation, only those projects, only those balance sheets, only those developers who are bankable, who are probably still have a commerce left, or a commercial viability left, only those projects are going to see the light. In the rest of the project, the existing customers has to dole out something more. Existing lender has no choice but to put something more and make the conclusion of the project, where the developer actually loses. Technically speaking, he doesn't get anything on hand. So my view is that there is going to be a hard ones, and they are yet not started, because we were in a honeymoon period till 30th September or 31st August. And the honeymoon period still continued. So my sense is that consolidation of not only developers, consolidation of bankers, financiers, and all supply chain, as Shirad has rightly mentioned, is bound to happen. And it is not going to be very pleasant, for sure. We are yet to see that part of the movie yet.
Yeah. And Sunil, I 100% agree with every word that you've said, is that, there is absolutely consolidation, but not everybody is going to get bailed out of that. My small little question, and I know I have to complete this in a given time, are the special situation funds enough for the good projects to be completed, or you think is that we will still be insufficient on that money as well?
The kind of size we have, size of the problem is so large, Anuj. There would be insatiable money required for these special situation funds globally, because they can bring billions. Domestic guys can make millions, correct? So the question here is that basically we don't have billions available, correct? But internationally, my sense is that the restructuring is the only solution. The existing lender has to restructure. He has to take the help of Irfan and kick off those projects and get back but this current available capital only for this particular opportunity, as I see, is not really sufficient. If that's my view, because the appetite of risk, what banks have got, NBFCs has got, special situation funds have got, AI funds have got, and to that matter, the Swami Fund has got. The total quantum of money for this kind of cause still look to me very, very apprehensive, very, very small, and it looked like to me is not really ready for this kind of opportunity.
Interesting. Amit, I'm going to come to you. You've been on both sides, this side and that side, and you've got a great perspective. First, tell me how difficult it is to invest money. You give me money, I can invest very quickly. But I hear that it is very difficult if you're on the other side. I'd love to know a little bit more how easy or difficult it is to invest money.
Thank you very much, Anuj, for the opportunity. It's indeed a pleasure to be here. The challenge with investing capital is, as you rightly said, on one side, there seems to be a...
Amit, can you be a little closer to the mic, Amit? A little closer to the mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So on one side, it does appear, Anuj, as you rightly said, that there seems to be abundance of opportunities, given that there are nearly 1,600 stuck projects, almost 4.5 lakh crore of unbuilt inventory, and lakhs of crores required to actually get this work done. But on the other side, from investment perspectives, the goalposts have been changing too often, Anuj. We've seen the induction of radar. We've seen a number of changes in the local regulations and development norms. IBC has caused also a lot of projects to be dragged to courts, and where resolution becomes increasingly challenging. One doesn't know at what point in time these late projects or late-stage projects will go into another legal spin or legal tangle, because there are available recourses for home buyers, whether under RERA or under Consumer Forum or under IBC, notwithstanding the fact that there is capital available to actually disrupt the continuity of these projects. So as Irfan rightly mentioned, the buy-in of the home buyers is also equally critical, but also very, very hard to get. So because of, and again, COVID has obviously thrown a new spanner in that entire equation, where again, the entire assumption on completion timelines, completion costs, the kind of demographic profile or customer sentiment that was existing is, on the back of reduced mortgage rates, all those assumptions also have to be revisited and be thrown out of the window. So clearly, it is a very, very challenging time in terms of actually selecting one, two, or whatever number of projects that you're willing to invest into and make it pass muster of any risk or compliance or management committees. Having said that also, however, I must admit that it was always challenging, but what has actually turned the tide in our favor is that better capable developers, or institutionally better capability, more well-governed developers, mid to larger size entities are actually seeking capital today, which otherwise were largely depending on A, internal accruals, or B, cheaper capital from mutual funds or banks or other series type of instruments. Now, because of lack of capital markets or mutual funds or the appetite of the banking sector to provide cheaper capital, we become the alternate source of capital. So clearly, I think the opportunity set, therefore, for us from a risk-adjusted return has actually become far more vibrant in today's times than it was pre-COVID. Clearly because we're getting better collateral, and again, in terms of subordination of capital, we're also seeing a lot more propensity of NBFCs and funds to actually be subordinated to a senior lender, enter into intercreditors agreements. And I must maybe thank Irfan for maybe setting that ball rolling in a lot of ways, where there was a lot of stickiness on the subordination clauses or actually be patient with their money, that's actually coming through now. So we're seeing that opportunity also sort of come our way, and that obviously increases the overall capital stack available in the project. So as rightly pointed out that by Sharad, that a lot of equity has got wiped out, but again, because of a huge amount of subordinated capital stack on which one is able to sit, there is enough capital buffer available in several projects. Having said that, obviously not all 1600 projects are capitalizable. We're looking to do maybe 15, 20, 25 investments, and therefore it's maybe 1% or 1.5% of the opportunity set. As Sunil rightly mentioned, the capital available is very, very, very limited compared to the demand. Now, that makes it so easier for us to be more opportunistic, more careful, and have multiple filters and layers applied before we actually have a throughput on the actual investment opportunity. Having said that, I must also qualify, Anuj, that we've also lost our deals to Irfan. People do get enticed. I mean, he's a great investor. I think he's got his heart and his objectives in the right place. We're obviously not only social impact, we are for profit. So great projects being snapped up in favor of Swami because of the way they structure it, because of the way they manage it, because of the cost of capital and the ease with which they're able to sort of go in and invest. So, clearly, that limited opportunity, which is attractive, which has got great margins of safety, is in the mid-income and affordable sector. That's exactly where the investment opportunity clearly lies. I think there is a bit of competition now, but I think still the pie is very, very large. So I think, yes, it is tougher. Our work involved in actually filtering a deal at the end of the day has gone up multiple fold times, but I think we're still better off in terms of the deal quality at the end of it.
Yeah, no, fantastic, Amit. Thank you very much for the roundup. I'm, Kaushik, going to come to you with, we started with Irfan. I'm going to end a question which, Irfan sort of set it out. Do you think, well, before I get on to that question, first, Kaushik, is what does the global world think of Indian real estate?
So, Anuj, clearly, I mean, a lot of discussed on the resting side, and my colleague and other panelists have also said how this, distressed funds are coming up and lining up. I think those guys are active. Opportunistic funds are always looking at the opportunities in India. I think earlier we had this kind of a structure in 2005. In our view, in the next 12 to 18 months, when things stabilize, the consolidation that everybody talked about, once that happened, I think the market will look much more attractive, because now with the regulation being there, RERA and other things being there, I think the market is much more conducive and attractive for the foreign investors to be in 12 to 18 months. But meanwhile, also we also see the similar opportunities, we being active in the market with some dry powder that we have in our fund, plus having a new fund coming up. So yeah, the opportunities are there with challenges. I think the key thing here, which is coming out from the entire discussion, is there is no you have to have doing hard work. There is no easy lunches here. So it's not you can't act as a lender. You have to have feet on ground and being control over the project.
So, Kaushik, do you think that there will be similar funds, as Irfan's fund, the Swami fund, focused on last mile funding, that some of the international players will set it up?
To be honest, Anuj, on paper, it looks like a fantastic opportunity. But I think co-panelists have already suggested the concerns or problems that we face. While Irfan has blessings from the government, and the objective of the fund is very different than yeah. So obviously the returns on the investments expectation for last mile funding is much higher, and to get those projects where there is a juice, where after the existing lender, there is a juice left for a new lender who is coming up, and the developer, it's difficult to find. I'm not saying it's not available. You have to find those opportunities.
Interesting. And Kaushik, my last question to you is, how's this work from home culture? Is this going to be here for long, or you think this is going to disappear?
for the time being, I think we have seen worldwide, especially in US, there is a large demand, and I think Sharat touched on it. There's a large amount of resi space is come up. So it is already started that because of work from home culture, people are believing that we need to move to from apartmental project to standalone home. Probably that luxury we do not have availability in India. But at least people are thinking about, and this is what you've seen. I think government has played that role in Mumbai, where they've reduced the stamp duty, and suddenly you see a spike in sales, and everybody's talking about whatever V-shape, U-shape recovery. These are all the guys who were sitting on fence and were looking at either 2-bedroom apartment. Now they're getting 2.5 or probably 3 bedrooms. So those things are happening. I think we'll see it's a long-lasting effect. Probably we'll see much more demand for residential in coming months because of this work from home. And at least this has shown everybody that you can still work from home. I think none of us would have believed that we could sit at home for 6 months and still work, still have this kind of a discussion on panels and all of that. We're actually doing that thanks to technology. And so things which were not, earlier we didn't had that mindset. We are actually practically following it right now. So
yeah, no, absolutely, Kaushik. I didn't realize that we were almost an hour and 15 minutes into it, and we've got a few audiences who are going to be asking the question. But one key takeaway is there is Irfan, that it's not an easy job that you're doing, is because everybody is saying the same thing. They're saying is on paper it may be easy, it may be a fantastic opportunity. But in reality, it's very tough. I mean, they've said that. I thought that it was going to be quite a similar view. Everyone would have it, and clearly, every panelist has come out and said, "Is guys, this is not a easy thing. Last mile funding. There are lots of problems that are there on the last mile funding." And Sunil, I love the way that you put it up. And in my mind, I compartmentalized into three things. The first is really where the developer is not supporting at all, and that's gone out of the window, and there is going to be a lot of problem. Second is where the developer is supporting but the lender is not supporting by giving in the additional money to complete. And the third is where the developer has no skin left in the game, yet he is saying yes. And it is really, really nice. It was heartening to notice that there are several cases, and you said there are at least 10 cases that are there that you're aware of, where the developer may not have any skin in the game, but he's saying is, guys, hang on, it's my moral responsibility. I need to make sure that I bail you out, Mr. Lender, and I make sure that I give the houses to the customers who have trusted my brand. This is fantastic. I know, Khyati, you've been sort of pushing me to say is wind this up quickly. I'm going to hand it over to you. Please feel free to ask. I think we've only got 5 or 6 minutes left. So a couple of quick questions, if you can ask.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Puri, and thank you, Chairman, for that very interesting conversation. I know I become the devil here when I'm on screen. I have to push for the time. But we have two really pertinent questions from the audience, which I'd like to pose to all of you. Our first question from the audience is, many banks are still on the back foot while lending to real estate and are risk averse. How can this be addressed? Any of you would like to address it?
Any of the panelists who may want to take this up?
See, banks traditionally have always been apprehensive about the real estate, not because of the real estate or a housing finance per se. The banks are apprehensive because of the poor execution of the projects, and non-completion of the projects has actually led to the higher risk premium while they do lending, and the project remain half completed, where they are actually get actually speaking impacted on both sides, because they give a loan to the home buyer, they give it the loan to the developer, and the execution do not happen. So both sides, banks get impacted. My view is that as more and more projects, and today let's be practical, most of a developer steal, borrow, beg, whatever format, barter, they're actually trying to bring in the capital to keep the crane moving, completing the project so that they don't default on the RERA and the criminal liabilities, correct? So banks naturally would start seeing the positivity once the execution starts. Now, whatever projects are not going to start anyway, banks are never going to be open for those, and we should not be expecting about that as well. So it's a lot to do with the execution risk, which banks are worried about than anything else.
Absolutely. Would anyone like to add on to it?
The only thing I'd like to add is I think RBI is being an amazing body from a watching out for a macro risk perspective, and this whole sector has NBFCs and PE funds have survived because they stopped banks from doing land financing, and it's one of the best things they did because the problems which we are all sitting with today and the NBFC books are sitting with would otherwise have been sitting with the banking sector, which is completely funded by or largely funded by retail borrowers. So I think banks shouldn't be doing some of the stuff that all of us here on the panel do. That's probably the right direction for them, but they should be doing regular construction financing for sure, and they are shying away today given the risks involved.
Absolutely. So our next question from the audience we received is, what are the factors attracting foreign and domestic institutional investors to invest in Indian real estate? I know you touched upon it in the last point as well. Would anybody like to add on to the point?
So I'll touch upon in this what Anuj mentioned, and Anuj asked this couple of times, whether the money which say Swami Fund has or all the special situation funds which have been getting committed, is that sufficient? That's point came a couple of times. The way I look at it, and partially answer your question and the audience question as well, I think there has to be a start. If this capital meets with the desirable results, then there'll be more money that will come in. I don't think so we can walk in this with a solution that, look, we have so much of trouble, we want so much of capital, on day zero we need a visibility of that much. I think Swami Fund, it's been a fantastic initiative on the part of the government. So there is an attractiveness from a social impact, but there's an attractiveness from a private investor, from a funds for profit as well. Of course, there is loose end that need to be tied up. But globally, there is so much capital. If we are able to this time round, don't really do what happened between 2005 and 8, 9. I think there could be more capital coming in to help us out.
To further answer that question, Khyati, for domestic investors, I think it was also touched upon that the lack of alternate investment opportunities, especially on the credit side, with the meltdown on mutual funds, with a lot of the bond markets not having done well. I think clearly the focus on alternatives has gone up, which is also clearly visible in the REIT segment, where there's been multiple subscription. It's a very, very strong alternate asset class backed by real estate. So clearly, I think there is a significant demand for alternatives in general. Second, as far as the opportunity set today is concerned, I think clearly there is an opportunity in the distress space, on the asset reconstruction space, and on the special situation space. And because that tends to have a much higher risk mitigated return today, because all of the risks have essentially played out, especially in the post-COVID environment. And there is a huge value accretion that because of somebody else's haircut or discount that a special situations fund or a global investor can make, which is why they're looking at higher returns coming at this time around, which was obviously not possible earlier. So I think that is obviously a very, very large driver for global capital to come in.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you very much, Khyati. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. It has been, fantastic, very knowledgeable. The quality of discussions has been, superb. Several great takeaways. I know we've run out of time, but I'm not going to fully summarize it. But really, two takeaways that I would say is, if I was to very quickly summarize, on paper it looks like a fantastic opportunity, but I think the implementation is tough. To do it, the expectation of the last mile funding on the yield is definitely higher, as I think Sunil, you said, is somewhere in the low 20s. It is going to be. But I end with what Sharad said, is that there has to be a start somewhere. And this is that start. So this is the start of your conference, Khyati. This is the start of the last mile funding. It is a great start. Swami set it up beautifully as the format. But hopefully, Sharad, as you said, is that funds for profit will follow that format, and hopefully a part of the sector is going to get bailed out through that. Thank you very much to all my panelists. Khadi, I hand it back to you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your time and sharing your insights. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, rightly said, I think we are closer to
Thank
our
you so
journey,
much.
taking that first step instead of not moving at all, right? So we're moving on to our next session, ladies and gentlemen. Before we do that, I would once again like to thank all our speakers and remind all of you that please